Okay, so yeah, working with Laravel, I hope you guys talked about how to set up everything from the env file hadi ufike that specific part of now you are generating your models, you're creating your CDAS, you're creating your migration. I think that I'll talk about that. So the first thing, Eloquent, ORM. ORM in most of the time, ORM is just object relation mapping. Object relational mapping. This allows like all days we used to work with we used to struggle writing SQL queries directly to query our databases. Like it was kind of hectic. I think most of us here have been through that, like where you now calling SQLi functions in pure PHP while writing your codes. So Eloquent, it makes it easier for us now to directly query our databases. It has added functions, predefined functions for us to query our databases without even writing a single SQL query. At some point, you might need to write if you want to, because it also provides that function where you can inject directly your SQL codes into it. But most of the time, you might work your whole project without writing any single SQL query. So that is what we mean by Eloquent ORM. It just allows us developers. We have to interact with a database without writing raw SQL queries. Like for example, when I have to write like select everything from this kind of database table, let's say select everything from users, what I'll just do is I call the model and then I pass the function all. That will help us. Let me check if I have a... So for the best part, you have to define your model. Model, for example, let's we call it users. These are users table, an entity. So users, most of the time, people don't rename models. Like someone creates model and then the model itself, they use the name of the model to call the database. For example, if you create a model user, added migrations, and it will generate, migrations will generate, when your model is user, it will generate a migration with the table name users. So I have my models here. I can call user here. This is my model here. So these are most of this is my model. When I get to migrations here, I must find I must find users table. So this. So once you run your, I'll create one just to make things easier today. So why should we use Eloquent? Why should we use Eloquent instead of just doing our raw SQL queries? The first thing, Eloquent, as I explained earlier, the main function of Eloquent, ORM here. So the first thing, we have to, it just makes everything simple. It simplifies everything. Like you are, for example, here, you can see here, everything is just okay. Like you just find it simple when you do yourself. When I want to add another field here, maybe I might just say table, and then maybe say string. Yeah, I can put string avatar. When I want to pass these as a nullable field, I can just say nullable. when I want to pass a comment, I can just say comment. Yeah, write anything here. Let me say anything here. And then when I want to pass, maybe it is a new migration. Oh, yeah, let me do this. Let me just create a new migration here. Start with that. I can create yeah. So we are into the root folder. So what should I do first? I should ensure, like in my env file, environment file, I should ensure, since this is just development, I didn't want to define everything here. I just left the query to be the database connection type to be SQL. Now here is where you at least define your environmental variables, maybe the database name, the database type, the database port, host, yeah, everything, username and password. So since I'm using my SQLite here, I don't need to add all this. SQLite most of the time, unless you uncomment this field here, unless you uncomment here when you're using SQLite, you don't, unless you uncomment that and define your database name there, most of the time you'll find your database file being stored here inside database, and it will be called database.sqlite. That is where most of all the files may be. Then DB, all these files, you may define them. It most of the time I've worked with SQLite, MySQL, and PostgreSQL are the ones I've worked with them most with Laravel. And here, if you don't know anything about SQL, Postgres, you just give it a PostgreSQL there. All the things it will work for you. You just know how to use the normal functions or helper functions to work on with. So I wanted to let me say I want to create a new model. PHP artisan. Now I'm creating a new model called test user here. So model created in app models. So we'll find our model, this part, app models, and test user here. Here's the model now. Here's the model. Then if I want to, maybe let me delete this. I want to create migrations with it. I'll just write that way and then maybe do the, yeah. I pass the M. Then when I pass the M, I'll be telling it to create a migration for us. So we have a model here and we have our migrations over here. So what should I do? Maybe test users, it should have the same field as users here. Let me call this. Yeah, so these are fillables, and fillables, these are the files, fields that you'll be able to manipulate directly. Like you can input data directly, you can update, delete. If you don't define a field here and you have the field inside your database, you won't be able to manipulate that field by yourself using maybe the functions defined. Like you can directly, let me say something like, I want to input data directly. Let me say like user controller here. So I can't, when you haven't defined your field in fillables, inside here, you can't fill that field or update it unless you have defined it among the fillables you'll be having. So for example, fillables, now these are our database fields, our table fields, the table called test users. Now the migration will be down here inside the database, then here. So by default, it comes this way. It always has ID and timestamps. Timestamps is created at and or updated at the two fields. This function here generates those two fields. So the others now, I'll just be copying from here. So these are our fields. If any question, please ask. I'm just explaining the simplicity of doing this instead of writing raw SQL queries. I'm just explaining the simplicity of why should we use Eloquent instead of unlike those guys using pure PHP to like for those who have interacted with systems like Doliba systems, you can see they are using it is kind of because they are running pure SQL queries there. So you'll find it a bit more challenging to work on with. So that is just the sample of it. So you can see our model is called test user here, and our table here, you pass the table name is test users. When you want to change that one, can still be changed. You can add a table, and then also add table. So for you to make sure that this is directly binded to this table, what we have to do is now to pass here table name. For you to pass the table name inside your model, you just write protected table. You include this field. It is a string. Then you add that way. So for example, our table is called test users table, as the one used in migration. So you just pass, and Eloquent itself will be the table name to the table in the database. So with that, now I can just run migrations. PHP artisan migrate. Yeah. Once you run your migrations, it will update your database. And migrations are not necessarily like creating new tables. Maybe I want to alter this table. I'll just create a new migration to alter that table. Like when you want to remove a certain field, you want to add a new field. For example, we want to add a new field inside here. You can say you want to add address. Now you just create PHP artisan make migration. Then we give our migration a name. You can say Okay, sorry, I left. I had gone. Someone was calling me. So migration, then let's say add. We give the migration name. Add maybe address. To test users table. Yeah, that way. So you'll find your migration here. Then you just pass your new field there, maybe address. Then address should be, let's say, should be after details. So you copy this, then you just put it there. So this illustrates how simple it is when working with Eloquent to manage your SQL data querying, and also, yeah, just it is database querying. Yeah. So should use is a is like SQL injection directly, because since Eloquent is a huge framework, many developers have worked on it to make sure there is a when it comes to security. So things like SQL queries are unlike normal raw SQL queries, the ones you write here. Eloquent itself will handle that. I only need to write my query or call my function. I won't bother working on the other, like how am I protected when it comes to SQL injection. Eloquent already protects me from that. Then the other one is to maintain readability and maintainability of the code. So readability and the maintainability of the code, I want to show you two examples here. So you can find this one is more the code here. You can read the code, you can maintain the code with ease. And let me open another system here. I just want you guys to, between the two, which one is better to, yeah. I can say, let me even that one more. Yeah. Let's just, for example, this part. You can see this one are direct SQL queries being issued without when you're not using a framework. For example, in this case, we are not using Eloquent. This one is one system, and this one is the other system where now we are using Eloquent. For example, let's query where we are now in our database, and also passing things like you can see here. We are passing SQL like relationships here. We are just getting data without any struggle. We'll just call when loaded, or you'll just call this and it calls the. So you can come to the controller. You can see creating everything is simple here. Readability is already handled, and also maintainability. When a new developer comes to my application here or my code, when they go through my code, it will be easier for them to understand and also maintain or update the code. But unlike this one, where you have to read everything, at least every detail, even you have to go to the documentation for you to understand what was line 69 to line 675. what were these lines trying to mean, or what were they doing?
Confirm your data.
And like this one where we'll just call where. For example, now I want to call I'll just, for example, query all or get. I get every details in that database. And like where you'll now write from users, I think I'll get, select distinct from users where, something like that. You can see here, ni ngumu kusoma this code. For what this query is doing here. It might take you more time to understand than, obviously it will take you to more time. Then the other thing is working with multiple database connections. I told you most of the time I've been using SQL, MySQL, SQLite, and so only what you need to do is the type of data DBMS you're using here. We'll just pass it here and then also enable this field if you're using SQL with a database username, pass everything from there. So when it comes to retrieving data, for example, here we have talked about maybe, or there are things called operations. We have also from seeders, there are seeders. We have a model that will interact with the database entity. Then there are things like seeders. There are things like
recommended items by value.
What is it?
Hiyo data inakaa ni kama ni static.
If there is any question, please ask. So and seeders. So for example, most of the time I want to create my application and I want to have an admin user by default. What should I do? I'll define a factory here. A factory, once I define a factory here, maybe I want to generate data. You can just generate the data in your database, and then maybe you're going for a presentation, or you want to explain to people, like, my application can do this, do this. What we use for you to generate the dummy data there, you use now, you introduce factories and seeders. So factories will define on how these new data will be generated. Then after now, seeders are the one now to see this now, like the new data, how the new data, like here you can see this, these are my seeders. So once I run seeders, like once I run PHP, migrate, then I pass seed here. Yep. It can't seed because now we have already some other stuff, so maybe I should use fresh here. So this will create your database tables and also any other related thing related to your SQL. Maybe I see. I know why. Can delete this. So that way. So we create our tables. We run seeders to add the data or the default data we want, or also dummy data if we need to have dummy data in our database. So you might interact with that, and to use that most of the time, I think our model should use this trait, has factory trait. Has factory trait is what our model should use. It will map the factory to a set. If you want to name your factory. I think there is a way of how to name your factory down here. Then, for example, you're using a different factory, you can insert that one, that here inside this table. Then this model. Then now in the user factory, I've said we now define on how our data will be saved, or how our fake data or anything related to the table will be generated, default values, and also that you can see here like fake name, fake, yeah, that way. Then now you come to your CIDR, our database CIDR is here. You can user factory, create, yeah, it creates your factory with at least here we are creating our data with at least 50 users, apart from this user we are having here. So the other thing I've talked about traits. There are observers, traits, there are also things that will interact with your queries. Observers, most of the time you might find an application, maybe something is being done, but you don't know how this particular item is being updated. You can get to observers, you check if there are observers inside your application.
There's nothing I would change.
Observers are just there to maybe monitor or also do a background querying or updates when a certain action is triggered. For example, when I think I used observers here. Yeah. For example, here is an observer. When anytime I create a new user, this observer here will be called. An observer is just a class with most of them are these methods.
Status specifically status. Hakuna status kama raised. But okay, ni sawa.
Then this one is also mapped to your, it is mapped to your model using inside the service provider. So this is how you map there, like user observe. For example, here now we are using the observer user model and the user observer class. So this is how you pass an observer inside your. For those, I think Laravel 8 to the current Laravel, it should be supporting this method. Is a procedure of registering observers. So these are now you register your observer, you link it to your, or you bind it to a specific user, to a specific model. For example, here I wanted to, when a user is created, the status should be changed to true, like status. We should change this status to true, since maybe we don't need to create that by our own, or the user can't take their own status to true. So what we do, we create an observer.
So that means
let me show you where is that. Yeah, inside this controller. So once this one once the create function is called, or method is called, and you have registered your observer to that specific model, it will trigger or call this action by default. It will call your observer action by default on created. So with that, for example, if I create this user, by default, I'm passing inside my control, I'm not passing status here. But once I save, I should be able to see like status if it is not nullable or if it doesn't have a default value. I should be able to see the status marked as true by default. Then once I delete or once I delete, you can see here once I delete, I'll mark the status will be automatically marked as false, and once I restore again, the status of the of that particular item should be true. So these are observer. You can't. It is in certain applications you might find it like something is happening, but you don't know what is happening. You might think even they are using queues or events to handle that. But most of the times, observers are the ones that manipulates your data silently. Any question at that point? So there are several CRUD operations to work on, like when querying our databases, our tables, querying our database for specific data, or also, for example, some main operations I've used here, query with the trashed, then filter by date. These one are injected using traits. I'll talk about traits some other time. Then you can see here search is just also done. You can see sort, user stats, this one is not a CRUD operation. So there is create, there is update, there is delete. Yeah, most of force delete, there is restore, there is find, there is where, there is most of the CRUD operations here, they match with SQL queries. So for example, I want to save or create a new user. What I'll get the data. Then after getting the data, now I'll just call user create. Then I pass in there an array of the data I'm saving. So that one is to create. And then the other one, for example, if I want to fetch all records in SQL, we used to write select everything from something like that. But now here, what I'll only do, I might do this. For example, when I want to get everything here, I'll just do user all. This one will give me all the data from that table, all the data in related to that model. It'll give me all the data from that. Then if I want to find, maybe I want to find by ID or something else, I'll just find, you'll just pass find. Most of them is, find or fail, and you might also do find. Find or fail, this one will throw an exception. It will throw an exception when this ID, here you are passing an ID, so it will throw an exception. But if you use find, it will just give you null if it finds that ID is not inside your database or your table. So find or fail, this will throw an exception, like maybe what you're searching is not there. Then the other one, destroy. Since I'm using with because I've used this trait. I've used this trait soft deletes here. This introduces some other SQL functionalities or CRUD operations for you to work on. So with the thrashed, meaning if any other thing is deleted. So if you use soft deletes, anytime you delete your function, not permanently delete, it will not be deleting the action permanently. It will just be giving it a deletion date. So if you delete an item, it will just mark it with a date timestamp, deleted at timestamp. Then it also prevents them to be fetched. So if you want to fetch that, you'll be using without tried, with trashed, something like that. But by default, it is without tried. So anytime you call, it will be calling without the trashed actions, the deleted items. So yeah, these are traits here. For example, sortable. Sortable here is I created my own trait. So you have to define your scope. Like you can see a scope sort, meaning anytime I'll be calling now, like user sort, it sorts everything depending on how I've defined my action here. So here I've defined the action, here the settables, the logic of how to sort and everything. After that, I think I've used it here. You call this, then it sorts the data for you. Search, scope search, maybe someone is searching. I passed here searchable, and it does everything with that. So these also a trait. For example, I want to use in my models, I want to reuse these functions. What I'll just do, I'll just create a trait, then I use them in my models. You can see I use. I've used those. Filter by date, trait. That is it. I've done that. So you just call. You have to name scope, then the action. Scope the action. Scope the action. This way. Then the other thing, it is not. Most of the time, most actions are case sensitive, but these are not case sensitive. I think, how do you call them? Magic something. So even if I've said scope search, then I use small letter, it will still search. I use uppercase, it will still search. So that way, and so traits are just there to add extra functionalities on our default model class or implementation. So the other thing, selecting a specific table, I've said, like our crude operations, Eloquent crude operations, normal SQL queries, those normal basic keywords like select, where, yeah, those keywords are the ones used here as say, what is it? Yeah, the ones used as actions here. For example, I want to get data or I want to search for something, I can just select searchable here. You can see here we used where, so exactly where, and then we pass a function or anything else where we need to do here an operation. We pass the where. You can see or where. You can, when you use where or where, it means if it doesn't find this combination, it should also select the other combination. But if you use where, it will mean it is just like and. You have used and. Both operations should be true for the data to be fed. But if you use or, and you have when you use these functions, you have to be keen on what you're doing, on or how you are passing SQL data, or how you're passing your functions inside. So let me get something else somewhere. Traits. Where between. can see like where between, where these are just normal crude functions, operations used by Eloquent. I wanted to give select statement. For example, I don't want to get all these. By default, it will give you all the fields when you call this function. When you call user something like user all, it will give you all the fields in the database. And sometimes even you don't want all the fields to be displayed. So what you'll just do, you might use user, then you say select, then after select, what to do, you pass in the fields you want to select, maybe the columns you want to select, maybe I want to select name, I want to select something else, I want to select email, and maybe created that, something like created that. Yeah, but at some time, maybe I want to get where status is equals to true. I'll just say where status true. Yeah, then you have to finalize with get for it to extract now the data itself. This one will get you back an object. When you reach at this point, you'll get an object. So you have to get. When you call this, it will now extract the data and give you out the data. So you can also order by. Yeah, for example, you are sorting. We can now say maybe order by, then what should I pass? I call created that. And then maybe in ascending the order or direction, just say descending or maybe ascending. Those are the two orders. So this one will sort you the data in that specific format. Then where, apart from that, we might also need to update. I'll need to get, let me go where I've updated some data. I've updated our data here. So I first find, after finding, I update. There is also another way where you can create or update when it doesn't find the data specifically. So when you use create or update, you must pass in the ID within the data, the request data, or also the data you're passing. For example, if it finds like now the ID is not in or the ID is null, it will now create. If it finds the ID is there, it will just update with the new data you have given it. So that is how simple it is. To delete, we'll just call delete. But if you have used this trait, for example, most of the times of delete, once you delete, it will not delete permanently. It will just mark as deleted by giving it a delete timestamp, a deleted at timestamp, to mean that this item was deleted at a specific time. Maybe, let's see, yeah. For these ones, deleted at it is now there, meaning they are not deleted. But when you want to delete permanently, maybe you just want to delete your data and start afresh, you'll pass permanently, delete permanently, permanent delete. See where that. Yeah, force delete. Yeah, this one. Just force delete to delete the item permanently. So there, apart from the normal CRUD operations, now we have to go to Eloquent relationships. So apart from that, Eloquent makes our work more easier when it comes to relationships. There are different types of relationships. For example, the one to many, one to one, many to many. So Eloquent does that with ease from our side. So you might, when they might be need to use foreign keys, they might be need. If you want, you can do that. Foreign keys when defining migrations. For example, I didn't use here. Just come here. I did. Okay. I don't remember where I used foreign keys here, but project assignments. Yeah, you might reference this way. If you need to make database constraints, you might do this, but it is not necessary because it is a good approach. It is the best approach, the recommended approach. But when using Eloquent, it is not necessary for you to do this. What you just need to do is to come to your model. You come to your model. Where's my model here? Yeah, here's my model. Yeah, my model now is attached to Great Teams. My model is attached to Great Teams and the main model here. So a user can, for relationships, now you define using, you just create for example, if a user has more than, a user can have more than one Great Teams. You can just create a function, maybe let's call it public. Great team members. Yeah, that way. Then you return. So now we are defining that. Sorry, I wasn't told how long this meeting will be on. Sorry, I wasn't told that. So for example, a user has many, can have more than one Great Teams. So this is how you define your relationship here. You can define here, then you come into these. So you pass the foreign key inside that. You must have user ID as a fieldable here or a field in this table. You must have that. Then the local ID, so it will bind this key, the key, the field here inside this table, and the other field from the other model or table. So this one will create a many-to-many relationship. Then this one will create a one-to-one. One-to-one has one. So then the other, you might also need, if you want to, you can see here, belongs to. Can also, maybe I want to add more, I can just say as many, or that one belongs to me. Yeah, that way. And this one, most of the time, it needs a pivot table for you to work on with this. That is not necessary at this point. That is just, I was just giving an example of a relationship, since we are out of time, maybe. Then there are many other relations. For example, maybe has many through, belongs to many. I've talked about that. Has many, belongs to, has one. Those are different relationships. So that is that makes you know that Eloquent is much simpler when it comes. It makes things easier when it comes to database manipulation and also querying. Then the other thing I might talk about is I think I talked about migrations, defining schemas. We define schemas inside our migrations. Then I talked about factories. Then also seeding, I talked about that. Any question?
Anyone with a question to Morgan? Morgan, are you done?
Yeah, myself I'm done because I myself I'm done.
Yeah. So anyone with a question? I hope you guys have enjoyed Morgan's presentation. Personally, I have enjoyed it. So, Moish can unmute and speak.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if I'm audible.
Yeah, you are.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to just know if by any chance there'll be a recording because some of us have just entered while it was uh, while you're continuing with it, or maybe at the tail end. Kindly.
Yeah, there will be a recording. Elvis will upload it and confirm when he will share to both groups on WhatsApp. So the recording will be there.
Maybe if we'd get some other time, maybe we're doing more of our practical stuff. There are things like queues, maybe accessors and mutators. I didn't get time to talk about that. And also when you want to attach raw queries inside your maybe model, or when you're querying using raw queries. So I didn't talk about that, and also query manipulation techniques, different query manipulation techniques. I didn't talk about that, but next time I'll get more time. I'll work on that.
Thanks, Morgan. Yeah. You've Elvis. I think Elvis shared with you the link, or you are in the group on any of the groups. Yeah, on the links that we've been sharing, there is a document that shows that has the topics of what we'll be covering over for the next few weeks until the end of the topic. So you are welcome to cover other topics that you feel that we need to to know, and we'll really appreciate your effort. Yes, also in that link and in that message that I shared in any of the groups, there's a link to a document that shows what we need to cover as Laravel community, Nairobi and Kenya.
Okay. Thank you for your time also.
Yeah, and any other person who needs to who needs to share with us on any of the topics. So from the links that you got, either on Tech Kenya channel or Laravel Nairobi or Laravel Kenya, you can pick a topic, then share with me or share with Elvis the topic and your details. Then we'll be able to schedule you a day to cover. Yeah. So questions to Morgan before he goes. Personally, I have loved the way you're making use of the traits. Personally, since the first time I got into learning traits, I've never any of my projects have always had those traits, the important traits that I use on a daily basis. So yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. Thanks. Kuna mtu ako na
Thank you too for your compliment.
anyone with a question to Morgan? Ama we can close. Okay, so I'll give opportunity to Elvis to close for us, then we call it a week.
Okay, mi sina maneno. I think tunaweza malizia na hapo.
Yeah, so hakuna mtu mwingine ako na neno. So thank you guys for coming and keep it here. Those who are new in this session, karibuni sana. I can see, maybe I can just give a shout out to the new people. I feel like I've seen them for the first time. One is Muesh. Francis, you've been here. Franklin Shege, it's your first time here. Morgan, I'm also seeing you here for the first time, Morgan.
Yeah, sure.
Then who else? Morgan, Ronisia, Fali, and Caleb. I've seen you here. Kennedy, I've seen you. Ian, you've been here. Yeah, Alvin, welcome again. And everyone else, karibuni tena. We can meet another time next week so that we continue sharing. So if you have any other question, follow up, you can reach out to any other person on the WhatsApp group. So that is it. Sinyi mtakuwa na a good night.
Okay, same. Thank you.
Thank you.